Hey everyone, this is Leanne from Of Love and Shiplap and the founder of Sublimation graphics and tutorials here on Facebook. If you're catching us on YouTube, please be sure to come visit our Facebook group where all of our videos air live before they are added to our YouTube channel unedited. And of course, if you're catching us live on Facebook, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Those links are in the video description depending on where you're watching. Tonight's tutorial in Affinity Designer is about how to create an offset for your text. I'm going to be showing you 4 different methods that can meet different end design goals depending on what you're working on. Now, you can find many different reasons to offset your text when you're creating a design. The first of which might be to create dead space. This isn't relevant if you're doing sublimation designs or sublimation printing, since sublimation is a molecular dye process. But all other types of printing for garments are considered a heat transfer process, and that includes direct to garment, direct to film, screen print, and white toner. So all of those, your designs benefit from having some negative space, and creating a text offset is an easy way to add negative space to a design there. Another reason you might be wanting to add an offset is simply to make your text easier to read over top of your background. There is nothing that deters sales of a good design like it being difficult to read. I see it so often, especially in they're called junky designs. That's the design category for any designs that have a lot of that marquee letters and retro graphics and leopard print and often a little bit too much turquoise. Those type of designs fall into this category called junky. And I see a lot of those that are very difficult to read, and that just deters sales. You want to make sure that your text is easy to read and that the offset method that you choose works best with your design. So that's another reason why you might choose to offset your text. You also might be just trying to create a knockout effect. I know I've used this in many different designs, and we get a lot of people coming in asking how to create that knockout look, and realizing that it's not quite the same as using a vinyl software like Cricut or Silhouette or Sir Cuts-A-Lot. I always like to reiterate that those programs are for vinyl. The actions that are in them are basic vector steps. It's not going to be the same as Photoshop, Affinity Designer, Illustrator, Affinity Photo, GIMP, Inkscape, Corel Draw, or similar programs. So all those ones I just listed are graphic design programs. We only cover Affinity Designer in our group because this is my preferred design program. It has a really intuitive interface. It's an alternative to Corel Draw, and it also has the features of both Photoshop and Illustrator in one. And it's a bit lighter of a software in terms of how much RAM power it uses. So that's really beneficial if you don't have a high-powered computer, or if you don't have enough room on your computer to handle heavier programs like Photoshop. And then the last reason you might want to create an offset is to help deter theft of digital graphics. You guys will probably notice that a lot of my designs available at Of Love and Shiplap happen to have something over top of the main graphic, whether it is a banner or other elements or text. I try and incorporate this type of stuff into my designs because it helps deter theft. When you just put a design out there or put a graphic out there that the clip art element that you might have licensed, or even if you made it yourself, and you don't do any of those little small things to make it impossible for someone to just take and extract that single element, you make it possible for them to take it and use it for other purposes, resell it, whatever. Now, we know digital theft is at an all-time high right now, so it is really important when you're doing your own designs, whether it's with clip art elements that you've licensed or with ones that you drew yourself, that you can protect everyone else's intellectual property by taking these simple steps. And one of those is, of course, offsetting. So let's go ahead and get started with our 4 different methods for offsetting your text. I'm just going to start a general design space. If you're new to Affinity Designer, you can refer to our Affinity Designer intro video for sublimation. I did link that in the video description. I have all these presets that's covered in the intro video as well. I'm going to start by importing some sort of clip art or background that we'll be able to work with today. So I'll just click on my place image tool. And I think I will actually use one of these sunflowers. Let's go with one that's a little bit darker. This burnt orange should work. I'm going to click and drag to import it and just get it nice and centered on my page. Okay. I'm going to hit the lock icon in my layers panel just so that while we're moving other things around, it doesn't get shifted everywhere. So the first option to create dead space is to add some sort of an outline. To do this, we'll just start by adding some text. So I'll click on my artistic text tool and I'm just going to type the word sunflower. We're going to keep it simple today. I'm going to use this script font. And resize it just a little bit, kind of like I would if I was actually going to make this into a design that I was going to sell. And I'll just zoom in just a little bit for you guys. Okay, so looking at this, the middle of the word sunflower gets lost in the middle of our actual sunflower. And because sublimation printing can sometimes be a little darker when it's actually transferred, we always want to be conscious of this type of issue with our designs. So the first option is to simply add an outline to the word sunflower. It's important to understand there is a difference between stroke and outline, and understand that you can actually use both depending on what your text looks like. So let's just start with a stroke. Because this has some fine lines, adding a stroke to this word can be very beneficial. So if we go over to our color panel and we click on that open circle, that's our stroke outline. And if we click on the stroke tab, you can see there's different options for outlines. You can do a solid line, dotted line, or you can use a textured line style, choosing from your brushes. Now it makes most sense for me just to use the solid line style. And it's already black. So I can just use the slider to modify the width. And you can see it's getting thicker. And you can choose whatever thickness works best for you. If the background was a little bit lighter, adding a stroke can actually be all that you need to help offset your text. In this case, we do need a little bit more, but I just want to cover the difference between a stroke and an outline. So the stroke ends up actually going inside of your text. So even though it's made it bigger, it's also going inside of your text. So to see what I'm talking about, if I change that stroke to white, see how we've lost a lot of our text in the process? So that would not be a good option if we did not need to thicken the font. We wouldn't want to use a stroke. We would want to instead use an outline. Now, I do think that skinny fonts like this benefit from you adding a stroke that's the same color as your fill and then adding your outline to that, just so that it doesn't look so thin and weak on top of your graphic. So I will go ahead and slide my stroke right back over to black. I'm going to make it just a little bit thinner though, because it doesn't need to be quite that thick. And now we're going to add an outline. So the outline option is actually under your effects tools panel. And you'll see that there's one right here that says outline. So if you check that box, it'll start to add an outline. You can't see it currently because it is black. We want to make it white. Anytime you're doing some sort of an offset over a design, it's a good idea to start with white so you can get a visual, and then you can always adjust the color anywhere within your color circle here, depending on what might work best for your design. But I always like to start with white. So you're going to go to white, and then we can increase our radius. And if you watch the screen as we're moving our slider, you can see that it's starting to come to life, so to speak. Now, look at the location of the outline. You'll see that it is actually on the outer edge of our font, which is different from what I just showed you with the stroke. The stroke was actually bleeding into your font fill and taking away from it. So this would be adding an outline. Now, when you're adding an outline like this is different than creating a knockout, because this is actually adding a white outline in this case, or any other color that you are using. So if you're doing one of those heat transfer printing methods that we talked about at the beginning of this video, like direct to garment, screen printing, or a white toner, then all of those printers have the ability to print white, which means that you are going to be printing this white. This is going to be completely solid. Versus if we added a negative background, which will be the next thing. If we add a negative background, then that all that white space would actually be knocked out. I don't want you guys to get confused though, so let's just focus on our outline for right now. So we have our outline, and you can even use your opacity slider to lower the opacity so that it's easier to see or less visible depending on what you feel your design needs. I do find that if I'm using the outline option, dropping down that opacity percentage just a little bit can make a difference in it being bright white and sort of in your face and looking like the word sunflower doesn't blend well with the flower, and it looking a little bit more natural. It's super easy to just play around with these sliders, and you can modify them however you want. You could even do a nice big one like this and then bring that opacity down so that it's lighter over top. So lots of options there. I'm just gonna bring that back down. And just like that, you've created an offset using an outline. Okay, so I'm gonna uncheck the outline so we can go on to the next one, which the next one I mentioned is to do an offset. Now, when you want to create a negative offset for this type of design, what you're going to do is actually create a duplicate layer of your text, and you're going to have it underneath. So we'll go ahead and right click on sunflower in our layers panel, hit duplicate. We're going to select that bottom layer one. I'm just going to put bottom text to make it easier. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on our layer type here on their layers panel, and we're going to choose erase. And you'll see that you can see this faint line right here, and that's from the outline that's in place. Now you can then go ahead and take your stroke and expand it. And now you've created a negative space. So if I zoom in, you can see our checkered transparent background. When you do an offset like this, you're creating negative space in your design. If you're printing with sublimation, it's still just going to look the same. It's going to be whatever color your shirt is there, just like it would, even if this was white, because sublimation printing can't print white. You would just have whatever color your shirt is in this negative space. But if you're using one of those other types of printing, the heat transfer types of printing, then this is going to be space where there will not be any ink. So the color of your garment will shine through this, but it'll also make whatever kind of transfer you're using have a softer feel and wash better simply because you added a little bit of negative space. Now, really important, you'll notice that I did that with the stroke. I did not do this with the outline. And the reason why is because when you use the outline, even on a layer that is invisible, if I make this black so you can see it, you will still get an outline. The outline does not get invisible, just so you can see it. However, there's a nice benefit to doing that, as I just showed you, because then you can add that outer outline outside of your negative space. And it's such a simple thing to add that outline on your erased layer. And as you can see with this, it actually works for the design. It might even work if we make it orange. I'm just going to see. Yeah, so even if we make it orange, it actually really works with the design to have that outside outline with our negative space in between. So just to recap that, this is if you wanted to create a knockout offset over top of a graphic, we duplicated our text, and then we set that bottom text, the one that's underneath it. So when you're viewing your layers panel, whatever's at the top of your list is most in the front of your design. Whatever is in the bottom is at the bottom. So we know that the text that's below the first one, that's our bottom text. We set that overlay method to erase, and you can see there's different ones that you can choose from here. But we set that to erase, and we increase the stroke to create that stroke effect around our text. And then we went ahead and still clicked on our effects panel and added an outline to complete that color. Now, this is one form of creating a knockout. The other one is to knock out text completely, but this does not work on an imported graphic. So typically when you import a graphic, it's going to be a PNG or a JPEG. Even if you have a vector graphic, it would need to be one layer, a one layer curve, in order for this method to work. So I'm just gonna uncheck our sunflower. I'm gonna uncheck this, but I'm gonna lock it so it doesn't go anywhere because we're gonna wanna come back. I'm going to right click and duplicate this, and I'm gonna uncheck this other one. So I'm just unchecking the visibility of everything we were just using so I can show you this other option. So the other option is if you wanted to make a knockout from a solid curve layer. It's really important that you understand it has to be a curve. For people who have used programs like Silhouette, when you make a shape, it's typically a curve. And that is why you can use a knockout method like I'm about to show you, and it's very similar, but it is also different when you're doing anything that's in a true graphic design program. So let's just say we wanted to knock out part of this. I'm going to make it black in my color panel here. I'm going to click no fill for the outline. So let's just say we wanted to knock out the word sunflower, but we only want the part that's over top of the rectangle to be white, or to be knocked out. So what we'll do is we want to make sure the rectangle is below our text. We are going to make sure our text is selected, and we'll go to layer and then convert to curves. So now this made all of our letters individual pieces. We need to right click and ungroup them so that it is actually layers. And then we're going to click and drag and select everything, and we will hit that XOR option. So when we do that, we did actually cut out our text just where the rectangle is. That's using that XOR tool. And this is a look I see a lot of people attempting to get with their designs, where you have this knockout effect. So that is how you would do this with curves, but this method will not work on our sunflower graphic. If you attempted to do this type of a knockout on the sunflower graphic, it would just disappear off the screen because your sunflower graphic is not a curve. Even if you choose to click on it and go to layers and then select to convert to curves and attempt to do this, it's not going to work the same because the curve is a simplified object, and that is what's necessary in order for these various Boolean features to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to delete these because we don't need that. And I'm going to bring all of our background back. Now let's say you wanted to do that same effect out of your sunflower. It's going to be a little bit different. With this, you're going to be creating multiple layers in order to get that same effect. The easiest way to do this is to create a second layer of your background graphic. So we'll go ahead and hit duplicate on our sunflower. Now, if we were to click and drag this into the word sunflower, so I'm going to show you that one more time. You want to click and drag it so it's underneath the name of your layer, not the letter, not next to it. You want to make sure you see this 3/4 of a length of rectangle. That's how you know it's going to clip inside. So when I clip this inside, you can see that this actually now has the pattern of our sunflower inside of it, which is a cool way to create that overall effect here that you're looking for with that knockout look. And then the other option is if you take that layer and you just choose your layer overlay option and scroll all the way down and select erase, now you're going to get that knockout effect as well. Now, because we've added a stroke to this word sunflower, we might just want to go ahead and click on sunflower, take off that stroke, and now you've got this option, and then you can also, you might actually want a little bit of the stroke. Sorry, I was going to say just lower the stroke like that. Or if you do take off the stroke, you might also need to take off the outline in this case. Sorry, the outline is our bottom text. So you can decrease that stroke a little bit so that it works better with our design. And now you've created the knockout here. And again, you can also just get rid of that outline if you didn't want to use that. And you can get rid of the stroke as well if you wanted it thinner. So all of that was happening on that bottom text layer. So you have some options there in terms of creating this type of knockout. But as I showed you, it's really just all about manipulating your outline stroke, your outline or your stroke. All right. So those are our first two options. The next is going to be to add a glow. So let's go ahead and get back to get rid of our fill. And so we just have our regular sunflower. And I'm going to uncheck the bottom text just so we can work with that top text. So you can add a glow by simply clicking on the effects panel and selecting outer glow or inner glow. I typically use the outer glow. So as you slide the little radius tool, you'll see that you've got this glow appearing. And depending on how far you push it, it will depend on how much the glow is. You can then also adjust the opacity. So it doesn't take much in terms of adding a glow to make something pop. You can choose to do just a faint outline of the glow and a faint amount in terms of the opacity. Or you can slide up and do full, but do a thinner radius. And just like that, you created a fairly simple way to pop this off. I do like having a nice bold glow, but sometimes the way that this glow hits like the thicker lines doesn't work in my favor. So there's an option for that as well. So if we uncheck the glow here, and once again, we've got that duplicate layer of text. So we'll check that. And what I'm going to do now is instead of having, well, you can leave this on erase actually. You want this layer panel to be erased. If you increase the stroke a little bit, so you give it that background, and then click on the effects tab and click on this Gaussian blur option. And now as you slide this, you're going to blur just that background to create a custom glow effect. I do like using this one a little bit more than other options because you get more control over the saturation of the glow around different parts of your text. And it just gives you a little bit more flexibility because you can expand how much you want the glow and you can actually get it to really pop off like this. And then you can also decrease that stroke a little bit if you need to, or increase it. Whatever works for your design. Setting an offset and choosing the right method is all about what kind of design you're trying to create and what that end result is going to be. So these are just different options for you to play around with it. And then the last option is to add a shadow. So I'm going to uncheck that Gaussian blur because we don't need that. I'm going to lower the stroke down. I'm going to uncheck our bottom text so it's gone so we can just focus on our top text. And I'll select that in our layers panel once again. And then I'll go to effects and I will choose the outer shadow. Now, the downfall of choosing the outer shadow is that your shadow can be different colors, but it cannot be light colors. So if you scroll this down to white, you see there is no shadow. You do actually have to pick some sort of a color. I know it's a little hard to see. Let me try zooming in, but you can see there's that faint orangish red there because I chose that. And of course, there's black. Okay, so I'm just going to put it on black for right now. Let me zoom out just a hair. There we go. And you have the same options here. So if you increase your opacity slider, you're going to see you get a nice solid line. But because there is this gap, because of how fine this font is, you need to lower that offset a little bit. So you can do that by doing the offset slider. Now this generally just creates an effect like you made this thicker. And that does work on certain types of elements, but obviously because this sunflower is darker, this might not be the best option here. You can also use the radius tool to expand the radius of that shadow. I'll zoom in so you guys can maybe see this a little bit better. See, if you watch right here, you can see that you're creating a different look for your shadow as well. And again, you can still like move that offset. And this is also how you would create a shadow if you were just in general looking for a shadow. Now, one of my favorite things to do besides using these different tools is to consider how I can use them in conjunction with each other. So the way that that works is, let's say you added a glow to this. I'm going to bring that glow down a little bit. And I'm going to offset my shadow. So now we've helped offset our whole text by using both the shadow option and the outer glow option. And it's created this cool, it's a little easier to see over here, this cool, almost like it is actually glowing and popped off of our sunflower, this cool little effect with that secondary outline that's behind our glow. There isn't a way to like move the glow above the shadow. This is how it would break it down. So if you wanted to have the glow behind the shadow, then you would just apply that glow to your bottom text. So there you have it. There are 4 different ways for offsetting your text. I know this is a pretty quick tutorial tonight. It's a lot to play with. And like I said, you're going to be just focusing on a few core functions in Affinity Designer. That is your stroke, your outline, your glow, and your shadow. So those 4 tools or features, whatever you want to call them, in Affinity Designer can make a world of difference when you are creating designs, because it gives you so many options and so many combinations of them that you can work with to pop your text and really help it stand out over top of your graphic elements. I look forward to seeing the kinds of things you guys will create now that you know a couple of different options for offsetting text. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and we will be sure to answer them. And of course, if you're catching us on YouTube, commenting is turned off. So come join our Facebook group and ask your questions and we'll be happy to help you over there. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening.